Hey, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Ciphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. We are now joined by a very special guest, Tristen Jessup of We the People Kalamazoo. We're going to be talking about some important work that you've been doing all over the summer to try to build tenant power here in the area by trying to pass some ballot initiatives. Just a little full disclosure for everybody at home. I was actually involved volunteering in some of these efforts. I had to step back due to some family issues that I've talked about on the show. But y'all certainly have not slowed down. Just kind of being able to watch y'all's organizing from a distance. So without further ado, well, I guess for again the questions, how are you doing today? To tell all the listeners out there.
Yeah. Andy, thank you so much for having me on again. For anyone listening, my name's Tristan. My pronouns are she and her. And like Andy said, I am a tenant organizer with We the People Michigan Action Fund. Really excited to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing.
Well, on that note, could you just tell our listeners a little bit more about We the People Michigan Action Fund? They're organizing here in Kalamazoo, and just maybe a little bit more broadly how you came to be a housing organizer.
Yeah, my organizing history, as I've shared a few times on your show before, you and I kicked things off back in around 2017 or so when we were doing more party organizing and you ran for city commission, and a lot of the dialogue that we were having with folks in the Kalamazoo area, folks were expressing a lot of discontent and frustration with the housing crisis that was facing us. Now, keeping in mind that this was 8 years ago, and things have gotten substantially worse since then, and it continues to be an issue that a lot of people are facing. With regards to We the People, I can share a little bit about them and their mission. They're based out of Detroit, but we have organizers operating throughout the state. Obviously, I am very much grounded in the fight for renters' rights, but I'm also supervising organizing around public transportation in the UP. There are people organizing to protect undocumented immigrants in the state and minority communities in Detroit. So we are trying our best to try to give ordinary Michigan people the skills, the training, the resources, and the I don't know the planning necessary to be successful at grassroots political organizing, so that ordinary working class people can start fighting for themselves without having to rely on big money donors and all the other jazz that typical politics in this state is entails. My involvement with We the People started back in 2023 when I was a volunteer. We were fighting for the statewide lift the ban on rent control. So we are in coalition with Rent is Too Damn High out of Lansing. Andy, you've been at a few of the events that Rent is Too Damn High has orchestrated at the Capitol. And our fight for rent control really set us up for learning a lot about what it's going to take to get something like that done. And it's going to require many working class people in the state coming together in solidarity and organizing each other toward a shared goal. And so that's why now I am so grounded locally in trying to establish renters unions, and in the process providing people with protections to engage in tenant union organizing, and trying my best to experiment and bring people in on the process of figuring out what do organized tenants look like? What does organized tenant power look like? And how can we wield this type of organizing to enact not just individual change on the lives of individuals, but also institutionally in establishing changes at the systemic level as well. So it's been it's an ongoing learning process, and the fight's been something that's been here for a long time. So hope I didn't get off on a tangent too much. I hope that explains a little bit about what we're all about and what
Oh,
I'm all about.
oh no, absolutely. I think that paints a really important picture about, kind of where we come. By the way, any listeners are curious, your fight for rent control, we actually did a long form interview with Tristen for our holiday special at the end of last year, where we really kind of did a deep dive on like what happens when, grassroots efforts meets the political muck in Lansing. So, um,
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think I actually did a one on your show 2 years ago where I gave kind of a rundown on the historical, like what the history of the rent control preemption is and all of the figures that have been involved in this game for the last 40 years in the state of Michigan. That was exciting
yeah.
to share about too.
We'll link to all of that in the show notes. I know, again, a lot of you students are coming back. I've got some stuff for you to study. So, anyway,
Always.
always. So let's talk a little bit about, part of the strategy, the big summer project or push here in Kalamazoo is on these two specific ballot initiatives that you are organizing around. Could you tell our listeners, what these initiatives are and why you think they're necessary changes for the people of Kalamazoo?
Yeah, so just to answer your question directly, there are two initiatives, and the first one is a local ordinance guaranteeing the right to organize. So, very plainly, it establishes protections for people who want to start a tenant union or other form of tenant association, whether that's in their apartment complex, in their building, on their block. And they can engage in organizing activities such as hosting meetings, canvassing and flyering, knocking doors, and making requests of management and things like that. Or if folks are more inclined, organizing to try to protect themselves politically as well, without the fear that their landlord or their property management company will retaliate against them. So the idea is that people should be able to engage in their constitutional right to assemble and to organize without fear that they're going to lose their home, that they're going to be harassed, intimidated, or discriminated against for engaging in those activities. And so that's what the first ordinance is meant to do, give people a sense of protection so that they can be a little more bold in their organizing activities, in the asks that they're making, in their requests of management or of their elected leaders. The other ordinance is it's called just cause eviction, or as we refer to it internally, right to renewal. Um, it establishes what would be considered just or unjust causes of eviction. The typical ones would include non-payment of rent or otherwise going against the stipulations of one's lease. Those would all be considered just forms of eviction. But we in the ordinance it establishes that denial or being not offered a renewal on your lease without any other form of just cause for eviction is itself form of unjust cause. So it establishes a situation where a person who is living at their place will be offered a renewal on that lease before the landlord can offer it to someone else. We feel like if a person's paying their rent, they're taking care of the place, they're not disrupting their neighbors, and they are abiding by all of the stipulations of their contract, that being denied their home when the lease comes to an end is unjust. And so we want to make sure. Now, this is not just to provide additional stability to the people of Kalamazoo, which it will. People can, when this ordinance passes, people will wake up knowing that they have a little more stability. They know that they can stay where they're at as long as they continue to meet the stipulations of their lease. But also it provides us with additional protections for forming tenant unions. We don't want it to be that a person is taking the bold risk of stepping into leadership of a tenant union and then management finds out who they are and then denies them a re-sign on their home as a form of retaliation against them and as a means of undermining the union efforts. So not only is it providing immediate stability to the people of Kalamazoo, but it offers additional protections for people who are engaging in tenant union organizing or other forms of tenant organizing. Just to clarify as well, both of these ordinances would be city-based. So it would be just for people who are living within Kalamazoo City, which is why when we're out canvassing, we're always making sure that the people who are signing our petitions are registered voters in the city of Kalamazoo. Can't be township, can't be Portage or Parchment. But we are also, as a team, building out a plan and actually in the process of that plan in forming relationships with our local elected officials to get these ordinances passed in other local municipalities as well, hopefully without the need for any additional ballot measures. So I hope that explains everything. Do you have any other questions about them? I'm sorry, you're muted.
No, thank you. Sorry, I muted my microphone. Just a quick follow-up to that, and it kind of relates to, some folks don't know, a couple of years ago, or I guess a year and a half ago at this point, um, there was a resolution passed in support of rent control. So I was kind of curious if you could explain the strategic value in amending the city charter with these ballot initiatives versus just passing a resolution with the city commission.
Yeah, that's an important distinction to make, and one that um, it's important. So when we were doing the proclamation back in 2023, the goal was that we were trying to pressure state representatives to lift the state ban on rent controls. Many of the meetings that we were having with state legislators in the House said that if they had mayors, local mayors and local city commissions contacting them and telling them that they wanted the freedom to establish some rent regulation in their local municipalities, that would potentially provide us with greater leverage in getting those bills passed and getting the preemption lifted before the end of the last cycle. And I was really proud of our team's efforts, the conversations that we had with the city commission members, and the support that we received from every city commission member as well as the mayor. And the passage of that proclamation was very uplifting, and we were excited about it. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually institute rent control, right? The proclamation itself doesn't institute the law to protect any things. It's just a statement by the city saying we want this to be done, right? And it's little more than just a message to the people above that they need to do something. It doesn't actually enact any laws. Now, there's several ways that we could go about trying to demand these protections for tenant union organizers in the Kalamazoo area. And we could go the route that we went with the proclamation. We could spend time specifically lobbying our local electeds, the mayor and the city commission, and the other people who they work with, and their various constituencies to pressure them to pass the law. And that was something I considered when I was putting together the plan. The problem with that locally is, one, I feel like we don't yet have the numbers and the organized numbers of renters and allies in the Kalamazoo area that we need in order to really impress upon our elected officials that these are issues that they need to be prioritizing. And not just prioritizing like they say they're prioritizing, but literally when it comes to, am I going to support the interests of renters, or am I going to support the interests of private equity and private developers and landlords? I am going to pick the interests of renters over them. And we want leaders who are going to make that choice. And in the experiences that we've had recently and in interactions with the existing leadership, I feel like we just don't have the influence that we need in order to convince them that they need to make that choice, that they need to be prioritizing us. And so whatever organizing we're doing, or whatever strategy we're using for getting the things we need, needs to serve our goal of building out the numbers, building out the organized base. So one, giving people something that they can engage in on a regular basis, preferably on a weekly basis, that isn't too outside of a person's everyday wheelhouse, right? Perhaps going and having an in-depth conversation with a state legislator about the ins and outs of renter law might be something that a lot of ordinary people might feel like they're not ready for. But going out and having a conversation with your neighbor about the need for basic renter protections is something that I think that almost anyone can do. And if we see like the way that people have been showing up, I think that that's indicative of this work being something that any ordinary person can do, collecting signatures. And in the process, we're making connections and we're making contact with thousands of people locally who have expressed their own frustrations with the existing system, their own struggles to maintain a roof over their head, to deal with conflict in their living space or with their management or with their landlord, and all of those connections, all of those communication that we're having with local people help us to build relationships and build out the power that we need to. The next fight will be an even stronger fight, right? So, but like I said before, like this idea of the ballot initiative, we are fighting for that here at the city level, but we are doing other strategies like the lobbying in other local townships, with the hope that if we can get the initiative passed at the city level, that will be a really good indicator to other local municipalities that this is something that they need to adopt, that it's something that the people want. So I hope that explains why we're going with the initiative as opposed to other strategies to get these passed.
No, no, thank you. I think that's very illuminating, and I think it's a good reflection, or not reflection. What's the word I'm looking for? I think it's good advice to like young organizers tuning in to the program that often, we're kind of taught to, lobby our local electeds and stuff, which can be a tool in the toolbox, but especially when you are trying to do some important base building work, it is really critical to get something that not only is like again kind of legally binding, and one other thing that I did think of is like there are a few landlords on the city commission, and ballot resolutions are a way of kind of again going directly to the people, for their opinion versus maybe some of the vested interests of the people who are already up there.
No, I didn't put as many direct words to it, but that's exactly right. Is this idea that we live under the law of the landlord, right? When people in positions of authority in our local state government are themselves landlords, they are far more likely to behave in a way that is going to serve the interests of a landlord over the interests of a renter, right? And so when we go in, it doesn't matter if there's 10 of us, 10 renters, um, you know, ah, that's the thing. We've had meetings before where we had 10 renters sitting down with a single elected official, and it'll make an impression. You can share your stories and talk about the issues that are concerning you, but they just won't. There's a barrier there, and I'm hoping that it will get to a point here locally and in the state of Michigan that the interests of renters are valued, but that we're not going to get to that point until people in positions of authority recognize that we have power, right? That we are just as powerful, if not more powerful, than the moneyed interests who are funding their local campaigns and working behind the scenes in local government here. So yeah, that's definitely something that came into mind when we were planning out the details of this campaign.
So you've kind of touched on this, but I want to dive just a little bit deeper. It always goes back to the movement question. A couple of socialists on the show. And it
Mhm.
always is like, how is this gonna build power of the working class? So if you can just maybe dive a little bit more deeply into how these initiatives help build that tenant power in the area and how it ties into the organization's broader strategy for doing so.
Yeah. So what I'd really really like to see is a tenant union organizer, someone who is in an existing union fighting for the interests of that union, winning a seat on the city council or on in the state house or in state senate or even better a governorship, right? Someone who is one of us, a working class person who sitting in a position of power. Now there's a lot of like questions about how do you make that happen? How do you get people who have no money, who have no spare time, to a point where they can win really important seats of power in our government if we don't have millions of dollars to spare. And the only way that we can do that is if we have just literally thousands of people organized, right? And the goal would be that if we're able to organize tenant unions, like lots of tenant unions, and not just like one building here, one building there, but like to the point where every renter realizes that they have a stake in like the union itself, the trying to build out that dream that you had of the greater Kalamazoo tenants union and getting like everyone in the area involved, then you would have the same type of electoral power as, say, a labor union, right? A labor union is able to swing its weight around politically because it is able to tell the thousands of people who are a part of that labor union who they endorse to win the election, right? They have enormous voter power, and I think that not only do tenant unions have economic power, right? They can leverage things directly to their landlord in the same way that workers have economic power that they can leverage directly to their management. But the political power that they have together only comes from the organizing, right? They have to be organized, and they have to have a structure of democracy that is elevating leadership that is able to represent the interests of the whole. So the idea is that through tenant union organizing, we are building out a base while also finding and empowering potential new leaders who are living the conditions that ordinary people are living and are not in it for their own ego or their own financial gain, but in it specifically because they want to protect the interests of working class people.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that note, I know something we refer to a lot on the show, the concept of a general strike or rent strike. And I always tell listeners it's like, there's been discussions of like a mass general strike in 2028, and we see rent strikes used as a tactic around the country. We've reported on it before, and those don't happen in a vacuum, and they certainly don't happen just because a bunch of tenants in one area just simultaneously push a button at the same time. It happens because of this kind of in-depth door to door organizing. And I think sometimes people, we sometimes have, especially in the U.S., kind of a movement tradition of spontaneity in the last couple of decades. And I think what a big part of what you're trying to do and what the Tennessee is trying to bring that structure where people can kind of exercise their economic power in a much more focused and targeted way. Does that sound like a kind of a fair reading or?
Absolutely. In the same way that a labor union has a bargaining relationship with their management, we want tenant unions to have a bargaining relationship with landlords and property developers, right? This idea that um, it's a two-way street, right? The contract has two parties, and when one of those parties has exorbitantly more power than the other, then how is it a fair contract, right? So the goal would be that we would have a bargaining relationship, and what we really want to see in the future is that anyone who is renting in Kalamazoo is feels empowered to negotiate the stipulations of their lease agreement. That type of real, even individual power that is gained by the collective power. You mentioned strikes, and that's always the like the big one that we hold in our back pocket. That's what labor unions hold on to, and that's what tenant organizers hold on to as well, right? The reason that there is a landlord economy is because renters choose every month on the first of the month to shell out more than half of their monthly income to keep a roof over their head. And people, I've had plenty of conversations with landlords, and I know that there are some landlords who, um, who are better than other landlords, but the relationship, in my opinion, is not very fair. And I am very much on the side that if you're being charged more for the place where you live than you can afford, then you shouldn't be spending that much. Now, if a single person says, I'm not going to pay my rent this month because I can't afford it, then they're going to get evicted, and they're going to face a lot of challenges. But if the entire rental, all the people in a building, let's say you have 100 units, and all of them, out of solidarity with the person who can't afford, says, look, I can afford my rent, but I'm not going to pay it unless you let them stay, then you are able to make a difference, right? And I know that that sounds frightening and it sounds frustrating to landlords, but that's the reality that we live in. And if people aren't willing to Landlords aren't going to abide because they think that they want to be a good person, right? They're not going to keep the rent down because they really care about their renters and they want to care about it. Landlords are going to increase the rent as much as they humanly possibly can till people stop paying them, right? They will continue to raise the rent as long as people pay it. And people are continuing to pay it because they know that they aren't organized and they can't stop it, right? And I know that you deal with this trepidation in labor organizing as well. Oh, I'm going to lose my job. Oh, I'm going to lose my job. No, they need you. And if you organize and you build arcs of escalation and you engage in organized action together, you can get the wins that you need. But it takes coming together. I'm sorry if I went off a little bit on a tangent there,
Oh no,
Andres.
no, that's we love tangents on our show. Yeah. On my next question is, especially this is a big day here on campus. Bronco, well, I mean, this is recorded ahead of time, but Bronco Bash is going to be going on when this is playing on the air. And our show has a few core audiences. To quote the president, the radical left, the Marxists, the anarchists, the agitators. Um, we also, of course, though, a lot of students here at Western are part of our show's audience. A lot of them are going to be here at Bronco Bash. So I wanted to ask something specific to that and to that uh, part of our audience. What stake do students here in Kalamazoo have in, renters' rights, and how would they benefit from these ballot initiatives?
Yeah, I kind of want to talk a little bit about Kalamazoo being a college town. And I think a lot of times people in Michigan don't really think about Kalamazoo that way. They think of college towns, they think of Ann Arbor or, MSU or up in the UP. I don't think they really think about Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo has an Ivy League college, it has a state university, and it has a community college, and it has a bunch of technical schools as well. Not to mention it has the Kalamazoo Promise, and so a lot of people come here specifically for that, and they stick around for the colleges here. And so the idea that Kalamazoo is a college town plays a very, very crucial role in why rent is so unbearably expensive in this city. Rent has gone up more than 50% since the pandemic for a lot of reasons, but one of those reasons is that a lot of the people who are renting in the city of Kalamazoo are students, and so a lot of them view their housing situation, quote unquote, as a temporary situation, right? It's something that they are temporarily living there, and And it's true. A lot of people who are students are not going to be living in the same place 1 year from then. They usually stay in a place 6 to 12 months, and then or they move back home, or they stay home for summer, or they graduate and they move away, right? And so this has created a situation where it's very detrimental to tenant organizing. It makes it very difficult to organize because of this. One of the most important parts of building a tenant union and getting the buy-in of a tenant union in order to build out the numbers to become powerful is that people need to take ownership of the place that they live, right? That's a very important part. When you're living in an apartment complex, the people who live there need to say, this is my home, this is where I live, this is my place, and I have power over how it runs, right? And when someone doesn't think that they're going to be living in a place in a year, that sentiment isn't fostered, right? People don't feel that much ownership. Now, when we're dealing with the current situation where people can be denied a re-sign for arbitrary reasons, that same mindset enters into the average renter's brain as well. Oh well, I don't know if I'm going to be living here in a year, so I don't want to ruffle any feathers while I'm here. That type of thing. But with students in particular, there's just not as much motivation for buy-in, even though students predominantly don't make a lot of money and cannot afford the rents that we have. So not only is it a situation where they're taking advantage of the transient nature of students in Kalamazoo, but they're also taking advantage of the fact that many students' rent is paid for by their parents who make more money than them, right? And so they're taking advantage of not just the students, but the students' family as well. And when businesses are operating on the assumption that renters have parents with all this income to pay for them, what happens to all of the working class students who need a place to live, who can't find a place because every place in Kalamazoo is charging for some rich kid whose parents are paying for them, right? And who isn't going to stick around in Kalamazoo, but the working class person might, right? Myself, like I had dreams of moving out when I left Western, but I'm still here, 8 years later. I'm still a part of this community, and a lot of the people who are working class who go to Western, who go to K College, who go to KVCC especially, are going to stick around and are going to stay in the Kalamazoo area paying rent that they couldn't afford while they were in school, and they certainly can't afford now that they're out of school, especially if they don't end up actually using their degree. So what I'd like to be able to do with drawing students into this is one, there are a lot of student renters, and so there's a lot of power there. There's so many people, and if there was like a legacy group that was about drawing in these people who have a lot of turnaround, but they have like an existing system for people who are coming in, like a student tenant union, then we could build like over time power, drawing them into the fight. But also we could be organizing for tenant rights on campus as well, right? There are situations that people are dealing with, living situations on campus as well. And then there's also the element that there's a lot of people who are younger, who are students, who a lot of young people really want to get involved in political action and want to learn about grassroots organizing, and they want to learn about what this work looks like. We recently had three college interns who were part of our policy team here at West We the People, who, among many other things, also helped us in my campaign collecting or knocking doors on the north side. And they were able to learn a lot about what what it entails to win these types of rights, to fight for political rights and to engage in political activity. And so a lot of students who are interested in learning about this process but have not found a way that to get involved that might impact their lives more directly, that's where tenant organizing comes into play, and working with We the People. We want to be able to offer students an opportunity to get involved with organizing, to learn the ropes, and to do so for things that'll impact their immediate day-to-day life, which rent is one of those things. Sorry, I'm talking
Yeah.
too much. I talk too
No,
much, man.
no, absolutely. I just a couple points that come to mind. I think especially for young students who want to get involved politically, there's a lot of great organizations here on campus, but there are a few I can think of that are a direct route to power than organizing tenant unions. Again, it's very much about collecting your numbers together and being able to exercise leverage over, the landlords, property management companies in the city. Another thing that comes to mind, I'm a resident of the Vine neighborhood, and I think a lot of our listeners probably are. And something that kind of struck me a while ago, I was listening to another show here on Wider, and kind of to paraphrase, they referred to a lot of the housing culture in the neighborhood as like kind of, we're all like hermit crabs. Year to year, we go find another shell to slip into. And sometimes that can be for the typical interpersonal reasons you have in college. But oftentimes it's because of landlords that will arbitrarily, say, hey, like I've decided to do something with this house. I'm going to get someone else. I'm, whatever. And these initiatives not only give us, more solid ground, especially for, neighborhood like in the Vine, where houses can kind of become, especially in the realm of the arts, these sort of institutions. It allows the option, at least, for these institutions, whether it's a house show or an art collective, to have to kind of build a legacy and staying power you don't necessarily have if a landlord can arbitrarily say, "Okay, you hippies, you got to split."
No,
But
that's a
yeah,
that's a really really good point, Andy, and that's actually something I hadn't thought about. Is this these like legacy locations where people are, because that's true. There are specific houses, or at least there were in the past. I'm not sure if people feel as much stability to be able to even do that now, but that was definitely something that folks in the past did in the Vine. Now, I do want to mention that there are a lot of protections for landlords in the state of Michigan, right? They do have a lot of rights, and these ordinances are not going to address everything, right? The number one being that they can still raise your rent as much as they want, right? If they don't want you as part of the tenant union with these ordinances, they wouldn't be able to kick you out of your place. They wouldn't be able to deny you a re-sign, but that doesn't stop them from doubling your rent, right? And that would be something really frustrating and terrible. But that's why we need tenant union organizing. If you see a landlord behaving in that type of way toward your tenant leader, then you and your fellow tenants need to strike or engage in other direct action to protect that person from being from their rent going up. Right? That's the only thing we're going to be able to do to prevent rent going up until we get rent control. So honestly, the state refusing to lift this state ban on rent control, all it does is motivate us to build out and become more agitational, more, if necessary, aggressive in our direct action. Right? If they want things to be all peachy keen, maybe they should let us enact rent control, because otherwise, the only way we're going to be able to defend ourselves from this type of retaliation is to organize. There are also other rights that the landlord has. You mentioned with regards to changing the property, like the type of property. They still hold a lot of those rights, and they still have a lot of protections. And it needs to be in the forefront of everyone's mind, at least everyone who cares about these things, that if we're going to change the system, we're nowhere close to, addressing the actual property question. We're nowhere close to, as the book is titled, abolishing rent. But if we ever want to get to that point, people need to be organizing, and we need to be organizing around the issues that we need to be addressing with regards to property and the economy in this state, and tenants need to be organizing. That's what it really boils down to. Tenants, 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 tenants.
Yep, absolutely. And just to kind of just put a fine point on it, one tenant doesn't really have leverage to control skyrocketing rent, but 10, 100, 1,000 definitely would. So this
Yes,
is
absolutely, absolutely. Look at the success that the LA Tenant Union has had recently, striking for 5 years, and they got all of their back rent forgiven. Right? No, the power that we hold together is more than they will ever have, right? Because all of their power is dependent upon us, is dependent upon working people's uh, consent, right? To keep giving them our money and our labor.
yeah. All right. Well, Tristan, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about these critical issues. And just as a comrade and friend, I am so appreciative of, you referred back to like when I ran for city commission. We ran for city commission a few years ago. Like the big thing that we found knocking on doors was housing, 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 rent. That was the big thing, and really like grabbing the torch and focusing on this like a laser. I appreciate and am in awe of you as a comrade and a friend.
You're so sweet,
Um,
Andy. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
But with that, if people are more interested in getting involved with your efforts, how would they be able to do
Yeah, so I'm gonna send you a link if you could share it with the others. It's just a quick survey. We call it the Kalamazoo Tenant Contact Survey. It asks some questions about, your living situation and some of the issues you're facing, as well as your willingness to get involved. I have I'm a very busy organizer, but I'm going to be doing a lot of calls this fall to try to get folks out on the streets to help us collect signatures. We're at about the halfway point, little over the halfway point for the number of signatures that we need, and I want to get as many folks out on the streets September, October, and November as I can. Also, we are cooking up some local endorsement interviews and endorsements for local electeds, and having people out during this local election to talk about renters' issues in the context of this election season will be very powerful. So, if you have the time, if you are dealing with situations, if you want to become a more powerful person, please get a hold of me. Like I said, I'll share that link with you to post in this. Okay.
All right, great. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think y'all have a table out there at Bronco Bash, right?
Oh, yes, please come find us at Bronco Bash. We will have a table tomorrow, or you'll be hearing this today.
Yeah.
uh, and yeah, look for us. We'll have our clipboards you can sign. If you are new to Kalamazoo, we're going to be trying to put together a way for you to vote, register to vote for in the city as well, so you can sign as well. So yeah, keep an eye out for We the People tomorrow.
All right. Thank you so much, Tristan, for your time, and you have a great afternoon and solidarity.
Yes, thank you so much, Andy. I appreciate it as always.